Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Walton. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Thursday, March 19th, 2020. Time for yet another show, and maybe the last of the live shows for the week, as still scheduled to go ahead with surgery tomorrow. So if they're willing to do it, I'm willing to do it, depending on the doctors for guidance here. And I suppose they won't be needing any N95 masks to treat me, so perhaps that's why everything is set to go ahead. Fingers crossed for a reasonably good experience with it. I'll tell you how it goes, I guess, next week. Uncertain of whether I'll be able to prepare anything brand new between now and then. But really, with breaking news changing every hour about the COVID-19 outbreak, etc., and the political situation unstable, I guess, as it is, I don't know whether I'd be able to keep you up to date, but maybe there are some things we could update on in the background so that as conditions change heading into the weekend, if there are any important things that I think we absolutely need to bring to you, we'll see what we can do about getting those prepared for you. But recovery time should be relatively short, should be okay for Monday shows, and it'll be time to update us on the weekend's developments and all this. Much continues to happen. I see the outbreak making its way down to Florida, and Florida doing literally nothing about it. The beaches still open in Florida, and I believe in Texas for spring break. You know, they just can't stay away from the beach and spring break money down there. It's a serious impact, but everybody else is sort of having a serious economic impact fall on their heads elsewhere, but not Florida. Yay. Interesting suggestion. I don't know how we feel about it as Democrats and the interest we have in helping people who need help everywhere, but at least one Twitter denizen floating the idea that perhaps we would be able to get Florida's attention by cutting them out of any federal relief packages and banning any flights from landing elsewhere that might be originating in Florida, and that might get their attention and get them to change their mind sometime soon. But I'm not entirely sure that we would feel comfortable with that. There are plenty of people in Florida who will need our help. Conflicting reports on whether the hospital ships have in fact left port and are steaming towards the relief of the east and west coasts. As it turns out, some of them are in need of some major overhaul and repair and are in shipyards getting work done. And even if they weren't, they couldn't be dispatched immediately without several weeks of staffing up and preparation. So conflicting information about basic facts on the ground with respect to deployment of the military. If only there were someone in charge of the military in this country who knew what was going on and could make things happen. Unfortunately, as you know, we are a loose confederation of states, the Articles of Confederation being our current governing document, and we're all on our own, and well, Donald Trump is just a spectator along for the ride. Greg Dworkin is here. He's collected some news too, as was mandated by our confederation. As you know, there's no national organization that could help us figure out what's going on, so Greg's doing it on his own. Thank you, Greg, for coming to work in this trying time.
No, you're welcome. I have some articles of confederation, I guess, here.
Okay, yes, right.
CNN says that stock futures are down again, but no, not as bad as they have been. They're only down 400.
There is only
I've seen higher, lower, whatever.
Yes, right.
But their headline is Wall Street is updating its recession predictions. They're extremely bleak. You'll be happy to know that Campbell Soup is doing well. Hilton, not so much.
Ted Cruz likes it. That's true. Maybe they can help one another out.
Right. So that's what I learned from looking at the CNN pre-market thing.
Campbell
Hey.
Soup.
Are you disappointed that Bernie didn't win? Don't worry. Johns Hopkins is proposing Medicare for all, just in a different way.
Hey, wait. What?
Big article in USA Today, 4 reasons America needs a new coronavirus crisis insurance program based on Medicare. borrow Medicare's medical and billing infrastructure to give everybody in America access to coronavirus diagnosis, treatment, and recovery services.
All right.
Right? I mean, never let a crisis go, unused. As the shortage of testing kits for the novel coronavirus begins to wane in the coming days and weeks, and that will happen, we're getting more and more of them, the nation's going to face an even more difficult truth. The health insurance system is not designed to fund the treatment for this serious threat. Instead of worrying about whether or not Joe Biden's going to be lefty enough, keep in mind that this coronavirus is causing Tom Cotton to become a Democratic socialist and thinks all the tests should be free and such. So the Hopkins people say, look, there's hundreds of different public and private insurers. Those of you who have been steeped in this know this to be true, each having their own coverage rules, prior authorization requirements, co-payments, and deductibles. Many health plans have narrow networks that allow patients only to go to certain labs, etc. During an epidemic of a contagious respiratory disease, this lacks coherence and will undermine the national response. Congress is aware of this. To support rapid diagnosis, the House has passed the Family's First Coronavirus Response Act, which requires public and private insurers to collect testing free of charge and which creates a path toward payment for the uninsured. It's a step in the right direction, but the bill doesn't go far enough. So use the Medicare network and billing system. In one step, Congress could stop financial barriers from interfering with coronavirus care, the threat that will otherwise grow as more people lose employment and their health insurance. There's little value in providing free diagnosis if patients who test positive are reluctant to go to the hospital for their condition. And every delay in treatment is an opportunity for the virus to spread deeper into the community. So you are going to support Medicare for All as a public service.
Who, me?
Everybody.
Oh, okay.
Right? Second advantage is better data. Third advantage is more sustainable national response. And a fourth and final advantage is a mechanism for everybody to benefit from medications and vaccines for the novel coronavirus. Then you don't have to worry about who gets it and who doesn't get it, and whether celebrities and sports figures get it and you don't. So, it's all good.
Yeah, okay. Well, that would be nice, and it would be kind of cool to, feel like a star basketball player or a member of Congress.
But Bernie suggested, shut up, just back this.
Well, okay. But you could.
Is it a cult, or are you trying to get change?
You know what you should do? It's not him, it's us. You say, I backed this. That's okay.
I backed this. Yeah. That's right. It's mine.
I'm
mine.
proud of this actually working.
Okay, speaking of backing this, you did point out that the beaches are killing us. But yes. I saw some corrective action on Twitter, the most important kind, which is who to blame. All right? Don't blame millennials because college kids are actually Gen Z, so they're Zoomers.
Not their fault. True.
Right? So blame the right people who are going to kill us. That's my motto.
I hate them. Grr. Yes.
Yeah. Leave the millennials out of this. They're doing good.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Are they? They say they are.
Well,
they probably bought avocados and toast
as
and went home.
Peter Funicchiaro says on Twitter, if you think about it, communal loathing kind of is bringing everybody together, so I commend this.
Okay. Sure. Togetherness is important. Well, I mean, certainly.
Right, we're all in this together. We all hate everybody who goes to the beach and is trying to kill us.
Yes, I certainly do.
Now, you're right. Leadership matters. If this were New York, Cuomo would be not only closing the beaches, but billing them.
Maybe.
Right? And then yelling at him.
Yes.
And then telling stories about he and his brother used to do this when they were young.
Yeah.
But in Florida, you have Rick Scott looking like the good guy yelling at the governor to close the beach, and the governor says, I'm not going to, because I don't know why. Certain local beaches have, in fact, closed, at least for the weekend.
Okay.
So the message is getting through. Texas, again, I don't know. I'm not paying attention because I don't see it. It's not that I don't care about Galveston and other places like that, but I just don't have as much information. Florida's pretty famous for doing this.
If they had reporters on the beach in Texas interviewing the kids, we'd know about it.
Right. So somebody in the Georgia State Legislature feels lousy, gets a test, feels better the next day, and says, what the hell, I'll go to work. And now the entire Georgia, I think one of the two houses is now under complete lockdown.
Wow. All right. Well.
So the idea that the Senate is just going to, quote, show leadership by showing up is just like the stupidest thing in the world. But then again, politicians aren't elected for their brains.
And they do feel, I mean.
They're usually elected for how well they lie in front of the camera.
They feel like it's necessary for them to go to work.
Well, then you get a small group, and then you do things different, and then you figure it out. And don't just say it's going to be business as usual. It's just dumb.
Yeah,
it's as dumb as the Senate going home for a break this past weekend.
Yes, right. And then coming back out again. They should have stayed at home.
Right. Gary Graff has a really nice piece here in the Atlantic. I haven't sent you yet, but I'm going to. I think I'll use that tomorrow for the Pundit Roundup. Which is basically acting mostly independently, but altogether, we're shutting our country down, ensuring millions will face a massive, incalculable economic hit to give the weakest among us a better chance against COVID-19. This is actually one of America's greatest hours, and it really is. Whether it's Andrew Cuomo or Gavin Newsom or Ned Lamont stepping up and doing what's right, and our public health people, yes, there's been mistakes. It's hard not to make mistakes. There's so much that could go wrong. But compared to the White House, what the American people without the White House are doing is just incredible, and in such a short period of time. I mean, only Monday we were talking about, hey, everybody gets a message, and by Thursday, a lot of stuff shut down.
Yeah. True. We were relatively quick acting in some places.
In some places, right. So that's good.
Florida. Right.
Florida, man.
Yeah, man.
Florida. I mean, whatever. So, Dallas and Houston, Matt Hatter points out, discussing this with us, have closed gatherings, restaurants to dine in, but no statewide actions. That's because Governor Abbott is way behind the curve. Now, granted, it's okay to be slightly behind the curve if the amount of virus in your community is, in fact, less than, let's say, New York, New Rochelle, San Francisco, Seattle, that kind of thing. On the other hand, without testing, you don't know, and testing is still a bottleneck. So, when you look and see the White House response, one of the things we have to talk about today is this ridiculous, China virus thing that Trump is pushing. And I get a little pushback on Twitter and social media about, there's more important things to do than worry about how much Trump is a racist. He's always been a racist. But you don't understand. This isn't a throwaway line. This is policy. Yeah, policy always needs to be pushed back on when it's wrong. And this is wrong-headed policy. Why is it policy? Because Trump thinks he's going to be a wartime president and get reelected on the basis of being Ethelred the Unready.
That did not work out for Ethelred.
No, it didn't. Actually, Ethelred was called that after the fact, 100 years later. But that's not the point. The point is Trump is going to have the reputation of being a complete idiot, unready, doing it wrong, actually made it worse president. Yeah. But he's pushing this. I saw this campaign statement about trying to say Joe Biden's behind China and we're against them, so vote for us. I don't know if it's real or not. It doesn't matter. It's real enough because Meghan McCain was on The View, just pointing out, of course I'm going to still call it the China virus because they didn't shut down fast enough and lied to us, and that's the reason we got sick. Actually, the reason we got sick is that it came from a bat, as Richard Engel pointed out on MSNBC.
Shut down the
It's bats. A bat virus, so be mad at the bats.
All right.
But it actually has real-time consequences. There are a lot of Chinese-American citizens in the United States and Asians who Occidentals can't tell are Chinese or not Chinese.
Yes. Okay.
Right? I mean, there was a funny story that's not so funny anymore, but it was funny once. My oldest son spent a year abroad in Beijing and came back pretty fluent in Mandarin.
Okay.
Which was pretty good. So we went out years and years ago to a New Haven restaurant where he ordered in Chinese and had a lovely conversation with the really nice owner who made us special dishes because, we appreciated the effort. And then we went to a Asian market afterwards to pick up some goods that you otherwise can't usually find in the aisle of your local supermarket.
I see.
And my son started a conversation with the fellow behind the counter who just nodded his head and looked at him and then finally said, "Listen, do you know how to speak English?" I don't understand a word you're saying. And my son looked a little dumbfounded. And he shrugged and said, I'm Korean.
Whoops. Yes.
And these things happen. And so, are you going to discriminate against Thai and Korean and all sorts of other non-Chinese Asians? And what about if you're from Taiwan? And what if you're not, ethnically Han?
Right.
And what if you're Khmer? Or what if you're Hmong? I mean, all of these things come up, and discrimination doesn't really think.
No.
And it's, it's just terrible. And in fact, I think I told you the story on Monday about the Asian reporter who was told to her face by a White House official that we're fighting the Kung flu. And didn't miss a beat. Why would this be offensive? Why would I worry about saying something like that?
Kellyanne Conway fought yesterday over that, insisting
that's because it's policy.
Yeah,
They're trying to do this for re-election. It's going to get worse, not better. And yes, you have to push back against it. And the only thing that stops the Trump administration from doing stupid things isn't internal, this is stupid, don't do it. It's pushback. And so it's vitally important to do that. And that's why I get mad at people who say, oh, well, you're just being political when you say that. Well, damn right, Didn't we learn anything from the Iraq war where you're not allowed to criticize people? The only thing that happens when you do that is they just do worse things.
Yes, right. Or we elect worse presidents, etc. It's very true. You got to keep a lid on it. And I guess if anybody needs a reminder, we're still beating up and shooting Sikhs as Iranians here in this country. So.
Yeah. And now that Iran is dying off, we're not picking on Iran anymore. You haven't seen any, Iran's going to get a nuclear weapon in the next week, so you can't go to war with them. You got to go to war with somebody else. So why not China?
Sure.
Does that make strategic sense? Does that, never get involved with a land war in Asia kind of stuff? It doesn't matter. They just need to be reelected. It's not like these guys do anything. See, the whole thing about Trump and his entire administration, including that idiot jester Jarrett, who's got his own separate coronavirus task force based on Facebook conversations.
He's spreading it, probably.
Yeah. The whole thing about what they do is they never do anything useful. They just try to posture to make it look like they're doing something useful.
Yes.
And that's why these daily press conferences updates are terrible, because they have Trump coming out and saying something. Yesterday, for example, he was good in the very beginning. He took my advice. Said, I'm Donald Trump, and I'm going to now have Mike Pence present. And he stepped back. It was great. And I said, boy, he's really learned something. Of course, he came back and then pushed the whole China virus thing later in that same press conference. So, no, he didn't learn. Pence comes out and spends 20 minutes sucking up to Trump. Well, because of the actions of the great president who shut down travel to China, which is the whole key to preventing everything, which is why we're in great shape today and nothing's going on. Mm-hmm. And you scratch your head and say, what are you talking about?
Yeah, lives on another planet.
Really. So, and then, unfortunately, there's good guys and bad guys then who come out. The person who is still relatively unscathed, and you should trust, is Tony Fauci. The biggest disappointment so far in the task force has been Deborah Birx.
Yes.
She's the one who comes out with logistics stuff, which she's trying to make sense of, but keeps putting a happy face on it. And half the stuff she tells you is wrong. And she should step back and stop talking too. So, she needs to be replaced. She's not doing a good job. The fact is that she keeps saying the testing's getting better and better and better, and it is in spot cases, but not to the point where you can get testing if you truly need it. And as long as that's the case, and she's not apologizing and saying it's bad, but it's going to get better, which is not what she's saying, then she's doing a disservice because they're not telling the truth. They're also not telling the truth about the severity of what they expect. We all know it because we now saw the Imperial College report. We went over that yesterday. And rather than talk about what they know, they keep talking about what happened 2 weeks ago. And, that's not at all helpful, not in the least. So that's, I think, just important to understand. It's not criticizing because we're partisan and we want to pick on Trump no matter what he does. We're picking on Trump because he's not doing anything of the things that he's supposed to be doing. And in fact, when it's policy, like in picking on China virus and increasing xenophobia and discrimination, which he is doing strictly because he wants to get reelected, quite different than, picking on Trump because the policy he has is bad. Then I think it's fair game, and actually people should be pushing back more. And I keep waiting, and I understand that everybody says, no, this will never happen. But I keep waiting for the White House Correspondents Association and the people who go to these briefings to ask tougher questions, which they're starting to do. And it should be more skeptical. It should be more hostile, because you can't believe the garbage that they say. And when Pence goes on, well, the president, just interrupt them. Just say, excuse me, that's not the question. Don't tell me about what the president did 3 weeks ago, which was useless. I know you're sucking up to him. That's not the point. I want to know what's going on right now. For example, what's going on with these medical cruise ships? Have they left port? Have they not? Well, of course, we know they haven't, because we already got reports that they weren't quite ready to come, and it's going to take a month to get there.
Yes.
Say it. Just tell us that.
As is usually the case. I mean, we can at least say that. That's how long it takes to prepare one to sail all the time, which, the commanders in the Navy should have. Well,
for security reasons, you can't tell us the exact time and date they're docking. Fine. Give us a ballpark. We should see them in about 3 weeks.
Yeah, I guess so. And I guess that's all you can expect. But again, this is stuff that ordinarily is brought early on to the president's desk. And he says it's going to take how long? And the crisis is coming when? Start now. But
if
Trump
you want to
said,
educate the public about what's going on, you have to ask better questions. And by that, I mean it is perfectly appropriate to say things. And they did it yesterday when they asked about the China stuff. You keep using the China virus. Isn't that discrimination and bringing up stuff that you shouldn't be doing? And by the very nature of the question, which is quite different than why are you using Chinese virus?
Yes.
Instead, it's given that the World Health Organization had said this is a discriminatory thing and stopped doing this in 2015, and that everybody behind you, and this is the way they asked it, and everybody behind you agrees this is not the right thing to do. Why are you doing this? When you ask a question like that and the public hears the question, they better understand your mealy-mouthed answer.
Yes. True. Wow. All right. Let's see. I just saw, I did not hear this quote, but I just saw somebody saying that Trump's quote of the day, which I guess was from yesterday, he must have been speaking off the cuff, which he always is. People are dying who have never died before, he had to say, which at least I think he's right about that. If he did say that, I would have to say that's 100% true.
Repeat that for me, please.
People are dying who have never died before.
Well, this is probably true.
I mean, if it's not the case, then we have a bigger problem than I thought, and it is in fact a zombie apocalypse. But I mean, I assume what he means is, I don't know, vulnerable populations who usually don't die from flu are dying from this. Is I think if you wanted to normalize them, but at this point there would be no point in doing that. That's just that's right up there with putting food on your families, really, honestly.
Right. So, I think even in this day and age, it's important what the president says. It's important who he says it to. If you want the Fox News crowd to understand the seriousness of this, then you have to be serious about it. At the same time, he's still talking to the Fox News crowd as first of all, my main priority is getting reelected. My second main priority is preserving the stock market, and even that just because that's the way I get reelected. And then thirdly, I also want the stock market because I like to think of myself as rich, and therefore I really want to preserve my money. And so you plebes out there, you little people out on the beach, you're on your own. And that's what's going on. It ought to be presented as such because the only way you get him to change is pushback.
Guess so. It's not working to interview the kids on the beach. As everyone has seen this video now circulating from CBS News interviewing spring break goers on the beach, and they're a lot of them are resigned to it. Well, if I get it, I get it. And they heard heard before they left. We kids don't get this stuff, so let's just go. Now, of course, no longer the case, and I guess there's some stats on the number of people or the portion of the those hospitalized for coronavirus under the age of 30 is increasing daily, and maybe it has something to do with thinking they were immune to it. Maybe it has something to do with not watching the news and obsessing over it like Xers. But
that's been reported. But what that's really telling us is that what we're doing right now isn't enough.
Okay. That's probably
so. Everybody has to be on the same page, and everybody has to do this.
Wash your
and
hands.
What you need is
well.
guidance from the White House that everybody needs to do this. And in the absence of that, which is what we have, then we need to do, what the governors are doing. And by the way, while you still are young and healthy, you know what you should be doing instead of going to the beach? You should be giving blood. You should be donating blood because there's a shortage everywhere.
Okay. Sure. That sounds like
yeah. I mean, it'll have a
and
relatively high blood alcohol content, but that's okay. I think they can deal with that.
Well, that might be a selling point.
It might. It actually may cheer people up.
Right. Okay. Well, that's a thought. We could go with that one. All right. Well,
now,
let's see.
we have
What's
the Defense
next?
Production Act.
Defense
One of the
Production
things that
Act.
Trump said yesterday is that he's going to sign the Defense Production Act and help to reorient industry into building ventilators as if the parts don't come from overseas. That's what I mean about looking like you're doing something without actually doing something. And then he tweeted, I only signed the Defense Production Act to combat the Chinese virus. Should we need to invoke it in a worst-case scenario in the future, hopefully there will be no need. We're all in this together.
What?
Now, you want to dissect that and tell me what's wrong with it? He didn't sign the Defense Production Act. It's an act from 1950.
Right.
He again used the term Chinese virus. He said worst-case scenario. This is the worst-case scenario. He said in the future, we need it now. Yes. And we're all in this together, and he's lying. I mean, there's not one part of this that you can believe, and that's the problem with Donald Trump, and don't tell me it's partisan not to point that out.
Yes. I do believe he signed it. I believe they showed him a copy of it, and he autographed it.
He autographed it, which is not the same thing as signing it. It's an existing bill. You don't re-sign a bill.
No. He signed, I'm sure, an executive order, perhaps, that the law authorizes him to issue in order to get something done. And he's confused and doesn't understand the difference between when he's signing a bill, when he's signing an order or a presidential declaration or what have you. Okay, right. That is understandable. Let's see. I don't know. Anything else you have that's less than 20 seconds long that you'd like to cram in, or you can save it for the other side?
We'll save it for the other side.
Okay. You could wash Donald Trump's hands in less than 20 seconds. They're very small. You're supposed to wash them thoroughly for 20 seconds, but if your two hands are the size of one, I think perhaps, I don't know, less time would do. We'll get medical advice on that after the break. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, and I've learned that I either need to update these announcements more often or stop saying that the announcements are brand new. What's not new is that this message, too, is a call for your support in keeping the Kagro in the Morning show on the air. My thanks go out to all of you who do support the show through your donations. The stats say that Kagro in the Morning fans download our program about 2,000 times each weekday. But our donors make up only about 8% of our daily listeners. Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it simple to make easy, secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. If we're helping keep you sane during the Trump era, consider what that's worth. $1 a day? 50 cents? One thin dime? We do about 20 shows a month, so pick a number, do the math, and head to patreon.com/KagroX to let us know. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Just by way of clarification, apparently Donald Trump would have to wash his hands for the full 20 seconds, regardless of the size of his hands. Even tiny hands, I guess, should be washed for 20 seconds. There's no time savings involved for him. So just so that we don't give out any false information. To the
right. And by the way, not every beach has to close. If you have one of those big open beaches where you can walk it and nobody's on it, that's fine. It's those packed ones that has to close. There's nothing wrong with going out to a state park where there's nobody there except you.
Yes, except you're a moocher and love socialism if you go to a state park.
Yeah, something like that. So let's talk Congress, the ones that aren't sick and aren't quarantined. What are they doing? So Jake Sherman has some tweets out about what he's writing in Playbook, and he's got the usual sirens next to it, the police car little red lights,
the sirens
letting you know
Playbook.
that it's a visual siren. Playbook, we anticipate seeing Phase 3 legislative text today from McConnell. Remember, Phases 1 and 2 have already been signed. Phase 2 was signed last night. This is going to be theoretically the consensus GOP view. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell is expected to put out Phase 3 coronavirus bill, laying a marker for the consensus view of Senate Republicans on what's expected to be a $1 trillion package. Then, as early as sometime today, McConnell will sit down with Schumer. Here's what we know. McConnell's been talking to Republicans and also been talking to Pelosi, and McConnell set to begin talks with Schumer, and Mnuchin is in constant contact because he's the White House point person on this. Mnuchin's been keeping tabs on Pelosi and Schumer, who support Republicans and the White House will eventually need. So the Democrats are in pretty good position there, even though not in the House but in the Senate, they're the minority party, and they don't have the White House. And then with the Mario Diaz-Balart from Florida and Ben McAdams from Utah, one Republican, one Democrat, announcing they tested positive, how is the House going to have a normal session?
I don't know.
Right?
I mean, it's not just right. Those two guys.
Now, as a sign of seriousness, Deborah Birx, who I'm not happy with, the head of the coronavirus task force, is getting West Wing office space. So I don't know what that means. You can translate that.
Got to decorate it now, and it's going to cost a lot.
Oh, okay. And it'll be ready in 2 months. What to expect next? Hospitals have lost out on pricey elective surgeries, and some are in a big-time cash crunch and are expected to make that clear to Congress soon.
Mine goes forward.
The new buzz around town is hospitals may need federal assistance. With all the high-priced elective surgeries put off and lots of sick people needing flu-like treatments, hospitals will soon begin to feel pinched by the outbreak. Some hospitals are better capitalized than others, but it's going to come on Congress's radar quite soon. So soon there'll be a fourth tranche.
Oh, okay.
Right? That'll include hospitals.
No one has used
Does any of
tranche
this aid help those who are disabled or receive Social Security? Kellyanne Moore asks. And that's a good question, and the answer is we don't know. Meanwhile, on the House side, Chairwoman Representative Maxine Waters, and I always call her Auntie Maxine, and it is a sign of respect, announces committee plan for comprehensive fiscal stimulus and public policy response. It's really quite good. It calls for things such as $2,000 a month for all adults and $1,000 for each child, suspend all consumer and small business credit payments, establish a facility by the Federal Reserve or Treasury to reimburse creditors for lost revenue, suspend all negative consumer credit reporting during the pandemic, prohibit debt collection, repossession, and garnishment of wages during the pandemic, and ensure protections for territories. Also support renters, homeowners, and people experiencing homelessness, assist small business, support state, territory, and local governments, waive requirements for municipal governments, and support state, territory, and local government financing. And then it goes on, but actually there's some pretty good stuff in here that actually would help people as opposed to helping Boeing.
Well, that would be nice. People could use some help. I know I will need some help since my elective sort of surgery goes forward as scheduled so far tomorrow.
Well, you're doing what you can to help the economy, so I appreciate that.
Yes, well, that's what I'm doing. So I'll be needing that relief, too, as they came back to me with what's my out-of-pocket share for tomorrow. So that was a whopper. I'll be having to pay that. And the woman who was helping me schedule it is originally English, and she, I'm sure, was thinking we were nuts. That this would be free in England, but okay. Please send me all your money.
So, again, all of that is happening right now. There's at least $5 billion in homeless assistance. And if the House passed the bill, that would be great. And so when you hear about Republicans speaking with Democrats about the bill, they know that that's what the House is planning. So again, it'll be really interesting if coronavirus forces all Republicans to suddenly become, Democratic socialists who really don't care about the deficit.
Yes, and who do care about the homeless because they can spread coronavirus too. You don't need to have a house to do that.
Right. Let's see what else we can go over in the time we have. Oh, I love this. There was a Lou Dobbs standard poll on Fox Business, which I sent you.
Oh.
And even by Lou Dobbs standards, Jason Campbell writes, this poll has really strong North Korean vibes. The question is, how would you grade President Trump's leadership in the nation's fight against the Wuhan virus? So you still get the Chinese thing in there while you ask the question. And the choices you have are superb, great, or very good. Oh, and I think we finally found that poll that Trump was referring to where he's at 53% support.
Right, that could be it.
This is it. This is the poll.
Yeah. The other 47%
We're
walked
right in.
away. Yeah, I don't see what I'm supposed to do with this.
Right. Here's a story from Politico. Trump labels himself a wartime president combating coronavirus, and then talks about, what they're planning, and it's bad.
Okay.
So they need to be called on it.
All right.
All right, here's one from the New York Times. Trump defends using Chinese virus label, ignoring growing criticism. It's not racist at all, the president said, but expert warned that the term could result in xenophobia.
Yes.
The term has angered Chinese officials and a wide range of critics, and China experts say labeling the virus that way will only ratchet up tensions between the two countries. Cooperation would be helpful right now. While resulting in this kind of xenophobia that American leaders should discourage, Asian Americans have reported incidents of racial slurs and physical abuse because of the erroneous perception that China is the cause of the virus.
Yes.
Use of the term is not only corrosive, including here at home, it's also fueling a narrative in China about a broad American hatred and fear of not just the Chinese Communist Party, that's the CCP abbreviation as you'll see around, but of China and Chinese people, said Scott Kennedy, that doesn't sound like a Chinese name, a China expert at the Center for Strategic and International Studies.
He's an expert, though.
At the White House briefing on Tuesday, Mr. Trump told reporters he was attaching China to the name of the virus to combat a disinformation campaign promoted by Beijing. I didn't appreciate the fact that China was saying our military gave it to them. I think saying our military gave it to them creates a stigma. That's bullshit. I should have said it was bullshit before I told you, and now I'm telling you after. And then in two tweets on Wednesday morning, he pointedly referred to the Chinese virus. And asked about the term, he insists that he's simply pointing out a fact. And public health officials have tried to avoid the names, and then they talk about the 2015 guidelines. And again, during the press conference, he was asked about that and danced around it.
All right. So I think that here's White House reporters can say, stupid fat president. Why do you keep calling it a China virus? Are you trying to be accurate?
Or why do you keep lying? Sarah Longwell, who's behind the Lincoln Project, that's part of the Never Trumper movement. Trump didn't cause the pandemic. What he did was squander America's only advantage, a lag time during which to prepare, thus encouraging the spread of the disease when it might have been contained. He has in real and material ways made this crisis worse. And then they have the Dow at 25,000. Remember those days? And then saying over and over, it's a hoax. It's nonsense. It's not serious. We only had 10 cases. It'll soon disappear. It'll just go away. All the other things he said that was harmful and hurtful.
Now he says he totally predicted it, of course.
Of course. And that is important because if that's true, he's lying to us about how bad it was with those statements. And if it weren't true, and of course it wasn't true, then he's lying to us now. So there's nothing about that statement that absolves him. If anything, it just makes it that much worse. Axios has a poll out today. 56% of Americans are not 56 Americans. It's a big country. 56% of Americans are no longer willing to eat out at a restaurant or bar due to the coronavirus outbreak. That's up from 37% just a few days ago. And their point is the pandemic is starting to impact behavior. They should do beaches next.
Yes.
Okay. People still go to the grocery store, but they're not going to dine out as much.
Right. That's probably true.
These are things you're not willing to do. Not attend church has gone from 38 to 48% in just a few days.
Right.
Okay. Local coffee shop from 26 to 42. These are people who won't do these things. Travel on airplane was already down 61 to 66. That hasn't changed. People still don't want to go on an airplane. And go to the gym from 44 to 58. So, yeah, if you can find a socialist state park that you can go to that's open and airy, go for a walk, but stay away from those crowded beaches.
Okay. We'll do that. A question here from our listener, Asparagus Zucchini. Serious question, though. But you mentioned this before. Maybe he heard it and was just double-checking or didn't hear what you said. Asking if blood donations are safe at the moment. And they are. So
they are.
Important question to answer.
The blood won't carry the virus. If anything, it'll be a little protective because you'll have antibodies.
Okay. So
I'm not saying that that'll be the case, but hey, if anything, it's a little better rather than a little worse.
Okay. So safe, and they'll
and
also
by
have
the way,
alcohol
speaking of that, it turns out we do have antibody tests now available for coronavirus. This is a separate subject, but one of the questions has always been antibody detection can offer clinical information during the course of outbreak like this to figure out how many people have had it,
Yes. Okay.
And it turns out you develop those antibodies in about 2 weeks.
Okay.
They tend to fade in about 3 weeks. So the optimal time for testing somebody is about 2 weeks after you've been exposed.
I see. All right.
Clinical information we didn't have before. And you can't test them forever because the response tends to fade a little bit.
Okay. Well, everybody line up.
Everybody line up. So
Yes.
do we have the
In 2
wherewithal
weeks.
lab space with everybody else doing actual acute tests right now? No, we don't. But there certainly could be some sentinel places that start to do this that give us a much better idea of, exactly how this is spreading. And the more you know about how it's spread, the more you can combat it. Are the kids the vectors? That affects how you approach the schools. Is it your social networks only or your own family only? These sorts of things were learned during the H1N1 crisis, and then that was back in 2009 before we knew it was a relatively mild pandemic. We didn't know that, but we were concerned about spread, and studies done then about how that new novel flu virus spread have implications for how things spread now. Again, learning about whether it's on surfaces or not, and it is, and that it's not typically a small particle is all important because it helps you to know that, washing your hands is like the single best thing you can do in addition to, 6 feet and less than 10-minute contact with people.
Yes. All right. Well, at least we have some measure, and I mean all the same ones we've heard about for the duration of the problem.
Well, they continue to
real.
be true.
Okay.
It's flu, but not flu, and what we learned about that and what we did about flu certainly have implications for what we do now, even though it's not quite flu.
Yes. We were wondering yesterday, just at home, using whether this would help with next year's flu season if everyone was in hand washing.
It's helping with
mode.
this year's flu season.
Oh, well, okay. So
Everybody's
that's
getting
not
their shots, and the number of
concerns.
flu cases are down.
Okay. Well, that's good. We'll forget by next year.
So,
We'll forget.
it'll help by next flu season.
We'll forget. I'll forget.
Right.
I don't even remember what I just said.
Right. Well,
Go wash my hands.
the good news is I wasn't listening, so I didn't have a chance to
Okay.
forget it.
At least there's that.
At least there's that. I mean, it's like normal.
All right.
Okay, so that's what's going on.
All right.
Another, financial crash on Wall Street today, but not as bad so far as other
Right.
days. It didn't immediately open up at 2,000 down.
Right. About 500 or so now. 600.
700,
700.
3.55% down.
Okay. Well below into the 19,000s now, heading to 18s.
Well, basically everything that Trump did in terms of claiming, again, why is this important? The stock market is not the economy. We all know that. This is political, in addition to, of course, what it means financially. Mm-hmm. But the reason Trump keeps touting the stock market and the fact that he's in charge and it's great and Obama didn't do anything
yes.
is because he uses that for his election/re-election. As it turns out, the stock market didn't plunge during H1N1, and good reasons for that. This is not quite the same thing. But every bit of what Trump claims as a rally based on his own personal performance since he was elected is gone.
Oh.
And that
Yeah.
has political implications.
That's true. It's going to be that way. All right. Here's some good news for those who listen to the show for stock tips. Logitech up. How much was this percentage? Yeah, they're
Because
up.
you said that?
Yeah,
You know?
I'm sure because
We
everyone
did
was
not
listening.
make these recommendations. These are not recommendations. We are not in a position to make
Right.
recommendations. But apparently Clorox and Logitech are doing better than Hilton.
Yes, I think also Netflix. It's a good idea.
Yeah.
They have a nice new feature, I understand. As a good pandemic feature, they have a new feature. I can't use any features there. I don't know how it works.
What, you can watch together?
Yes, right. Party mode. You can sync up and with friends and all watch.
Google Hangout,
and-
but for Netflix.
Yeah, and I guess then you call one another and say, "Oh, don't go in the house; it's haunted," or whatever.
Yeah,
Sounds very exciting. I think it'll probably cure a lot of illness.
right. People are going to adapt. They're going to have virtual seders during Passover.
Yes, right. We're speaking of that. Now.
And there's a whole ritual in Passover where each part of the meal comes at a certain point, and you simply have to insert hand washing before each part of those things.
It's already
you'll
part
have to
of
have
it.
a new guidance, come
Right.
out.
It doesn't say how long you're supposed to wash your hands.
20 seconds. Well,
Yeah. Now we
this
know.
is, the rabbis debated this well into the morning,
Right. Tarry not, at least not for longer than 20 seconds.
something along those lines. So, again, we're all adjusting, and I think it's important to recognize that we're all adjusting and we're doing our part, and what we want are the feds to do their part. So that's my summary for today. I guess we'll have more to say on Monday. I'm not on the show tomorrow, so you won't miss me because I wasn't going to be here anyway. You'll miss David,
Yes.
depending upon what he does. But I'll be back on Monday, and, the world will have changed yet a bit more by the time I come back.
Okay. One more question. I've wondered
Sure.
this myself. Somebody, and so Eve asks us, so she's going out and walking while otherwise staying at home. They have a
Good.
nice
6 feet in less than 10 minutes.
Should she be taking off her shoes before going inside the house?
That's always a good idea.
Yeah, I mean, I think so.
If you're walking the dog, you don't know what's on the bottom of your shoes. What is the
true.
question?
Yeah, the question is, what's on the bottom of my shoes?
Right. So, yeah, always do that.
All right. Well, it's certainly good practice. It's good for your carpets as well.
Well, like you should have been washing your hands before now,
Yes, I know. People are very disappointed with themselves, I'm sure. But I've been thinking about that,
Yeah,
too.
take your shoes off. Leave it at the
imagine
front
someone
door. It's a
could
good
sneeze
habit
on
to
your
get into.
shoes.
There's a lot of
Sure.
cultures that do that automatically. It's
Right.
fine. It's a good idea.
Right. Don't worry. People will think you're Muslim. You just say
Viruses
I'm
don't
health
last on those soft
conscious.
surfaces all that long. You don't have to disinfect your shoes when you come back in. Save your Clorox wipes or whatever it is you're using. That's used as a generic, like when you say a Kleenex, you mean a tissue.
Yes, right.
Or a Frigidaire, and you mean a
Although stock and
refrigerator.
Clorox, it went up again when you said that.
Oh, yeah. Every time I say that happens. So, it's a good idea.
Okay.
It's like asking Tony Fauci, do you think cruises are safe? And he says, I don't know. I hate cruises. I never go on them.
I'll tell you, they've been taking it on the chin, the cruise industry, not just from this, but obviously, that's the first thing a lot of people think of when they're worried about cruises now is some other virus, norovirus, coronavirus.
Well, norovirus has been a big deal, and it gives you an idea of how quickly things can. And now that's worth talking about as well. We were talking about that online.
Oh, good. I'm glad I found something.
So you have these two giant medical ships.
Yes.
One is going to New York. I'm not sure if the other one's going to stay on the West Coast. Where would it go and why? And what kind of patients would be on that ship? And it turns out that for those who have served on the ship, and these are the ones who are telling us, the idea would be that non-viral patients go there. In other words, you offload the ICU non-coronavirus patients onto these ships, and you send non-emergent surgery and car crashes and heart attacks onto these ships. That's what they're prepared for. They're giant open spaces. They don't have infection control on the ships. It's not the simply the way the air is circulated on the ships, like in the other cruise problems with all the boats named Princess. But they're giant bullpens. They're giant, open spaces like Javits Center or a convention center. That place we were at in Chicago.
Yes.
That time. Remember that time?
Yeah.
Enormous spaces that nonetheless are not good for infection control. I don't even think the crew has separate space. They have their own, open space. So the idea isn't that you put these ships in the harbor and then you load all the coronavirus patients on them and then you set it out to sea and set it on fire like a Viking funeral. That's not what this is.
Not that. I'm crossing that out.
What you do is you take all the non-coronavirus patients and you put them on there, freeing up the hospitals for the coronavirus patients. And that's when they get here, which they haven't done yet. And that's assuming you can have staffing on these ships. Remember, staff, space, and stuff. This is the space.
Right.
They're outfitted with stuff, but you don't automatically have staff. A lot of the staff would come from the military reserves, many of whom will be actually at home fighting their own issues.
Yes. That's true. They will have that problem, or helping in their local community.
Right. So they're not automatic panaceas. They certainly will help, but they're not, quote, the answer. And that's why Army Corps of Engineers was meeting with Andrew Cuomo yesterday to talk about refitting hotels, Javits Center, convention spaces, and other things, because space is going to be sorely needed. And so you got to figure out how to do that and do it in a safe way. Yeah. But again, not all of the designated new space is going to be for coronavirus patients. It's going to be for non-coronavirus patients, so you can continue to take care of them even in the midst of a crisis.
That's the big problem anyway.
Yeah.
All
So I just wanted to clarify that. So it's going to take a while to get here. When it does get here, that's not where the coronavirus patients are going to go. It's a method to offload the stress on the system so that the system can better handle whatever it is that they're going to see. And again, when the peak of that is going to be is unknown. But if we do our job, it's going to last longer than shorter. And again, that's all stuff to keep in mind.
All right, we can do it. And, yeah, they're certainly very impressive looking, the hospital ships. A big, giant, floating white ship.
Well,
with a
it's
red cross
part
on it.
of, despite the federal government response that everybody is thinking about these things, thinking a little bit out of the box. It's all good. It'd be really nice if we had somebody in charge who knew how to handle a crisis. That person is not Donald Trump. And again, it's not because we're taking partisan potshots at him. If you don't understand what went wrong, you have no chance of fixing it so it doesn't go wrong again. Mm-hmm. So again, when you see Trump doing bad policy, and racism is bad policy, it's totally appropriate in the midst of a crisis to point it out rather than say, oh, that's something we should deal with later. We can assign blame later. No, you don't understand. If you don't know it's broken, you won't be able to fix it now. And now is when we have to fix it. So an issue I feel strongly about. So again, take care, and I'll talk to you on Monday.
Okay, very good. Thanks a lot, Greg. I think we got some good answers out there for everybody. People will be washing their shoes and taking their hands off before entering the house, I think, if we just don't get it backwards. Get it right. Thanks again. And all right, we're on our way. Plenty to catch up with. One of the more unusual ripple effects of the shall we call it, if I'm speaking of an outbreak, is it a coronavirus outbreak or a COVID-19 outbreak? I'm still not sure. I understand the difference between the two, of course. I just don't know which one would get paired with the word outbreak. Anyway, wasn't expecting this one, but got news, a tip on my usual KITM hashtag tip line from Patrick Snyder. This, too, caught him unexpected. Okay, and Greg says either one. I can say an outbreak of either COVID, either COVID or coronavirus. It's all an outbreak. And I guess no one will stop and correct me. But, this is the note I got from Patrick Center. And by the way, about our KITM hashtag, where we lost a KITM hashtag buddy. Not a death of like somebody who listens to the show and tweets us, but just as well, really, for the show. There's another radio show out there that uses the KITM hashtag sparingly. They weren't getting a huge amount of views on it. Their K person, and it really was ITM in the morning, was Kevin in the morning, and apparently a radio show on KROQ radio, which has been canceled. And unfortunately, their whole staff fired, which is bad news. And I don't know anything about the show, but I sort of felt like I did because I saw their tweets every once in a while. And I guess they'll be jumping out of the way now, and the hashtag is more at our disposal. But Patrick used it to send me this note from a tweet from Las Vegas locally, who says that the air traffic control tower at McCarran International Airport has been cleared out and flights are being diverted. And I have, let's see, there's a news story that finally appears lower down in the thread. I'll open that up and just get the word from, I guess, the CBS affiliate there on Channel 8. McCarran air traffic controller, quote, potentially tested positive for COVID-19. And I guess that potential was enough to scare everybody out. And here's something I hadn't been thinking about. For all the people we read about who have continued to go to work, imagine the control tower of a major international airport bugging out and everybody running away because somebody potentially tested positive. Well, Lucas Wright is the author of the write-up for Channel 8 here. Flights from around the globe diverted away from McCarran International Airport Wednesday night, due to an air traffic controller potentially testing positive for COVID-19. The air traffic control tower is now temporarily closed, and the Las Vegas Terminal Radar Approach Control has assumed control of the airspace. I assume that's a good thing? I mean, versus like letting it go unmonitored, I suppose. But I don't know exactly what we're talking about here. Las Vegas Terminal Radar Approach Control. Probably some great people in there, and I wish I knew more about them. The FAA originally reported the air traffic controller tested positive, but then later amended the statement rather, and said that the person potentially tested positive. And aren't we all potentially positive tests? Here's the full amended statement from the FAA. We'll see if we can make heads or tails of it. The air traffic control tower at McCarran International Airport, that's LAS, in Las Vegas, Vegas, is temporarily closing while we ensure a safe work environment for air traffic controllers and technicians. By the way, what are they going to do about a safe work environment for people flying around in circles outside of Las Vegas? On Wednesday, an air traffic controller at the facility potentially tested positive, that's bolded, for the COVID-19 virus. The Las Vegas Terminal Radar Approach Control has assumed control of the airspace. Everybody go away, they said. The airport remains open, and operations will continue at a reduced rate until the situation is resolved. Though if your air traffic control tower is closed, I don't know what that means exactly. I guess you can still get Cinnabon at Las Vegas in McCarran International Airport, but you can't fly anywhere. So it's really more of a Cinnabon port than anything else. I guess you can, I don't know. I don't know what they're doing. Our flights, I understand people were saying there were still flights coming in and going at a slower pace, and maybe that now everything is fine. I don't know. But yesterday they had to stop things. The air traffic system is a resilient system with multiple backups in place. You just can't go to Las Vegas. This shift in operational control is a regular execution of a long-standing contingency plan, to ensure continued operations. Each facility across the country has a similar plan that has been updated and tested in recent years. And so that's meant to put you at ease if you're worried about someone in your local airport control tower coming down with COVID-19. And I guess it does. The safety of our staff and the traveling public is the FAA's top priority. That's nice to know. Our controllers, inspectors, and others with critical safety or security sensitive roles are essential components of our national airspace. The FAA continues to maintain close contact with airports, airlines, and other stakeholders during this situation. So I guess the fact is that you could have an air traffic controller at the control tower at your airport come down with COVID-19, and there's a plan in place for what to do if everybody has to get the hell out of the tower right away. I don't know if that's actually the proper reaction, but it doesn't matter. They can transfer control by radio. They can work remotely from another tower, and it works out. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. So, okay, you can only do that for so many towers, I assume, but at least things worked out there in Las Vegas. We hope we don't have to go through the same exercise in too many other places. But just one of the things that we probably didn't give a great deal of thought to ahead of time that would worry people. But, luckily, I guess we're dealing with lower volume of air traffic, generally speaking. Anyway, all right, let's see. Other things in the news. Greg mentioned we've got 2 members of Congress who have actually tested positive for coronavirus as opposed to being voluntarily in quarantine in case they have it or because they were exposed to it. Congressman Mario Diaz-Balart of Florida, no surprise, I guess, for Florida, and Ben McAdams of Utah, which I don't know whether they've had any clusters in Utah or not. May come as more of a surprise. What might come as even more of a surprise is that Mario Diaz-Balart of Florida is a Republican and Ben McAdams of Utah is a Democrat. So just in case you were wondering, yes, both sides when it comes to infecting people with coronavirus. The news is, CNN reporting on this one. Paul LeBlanc on the write-up. Representatives Mario Diaz-Balart and Ben McAdams have become the first members of Congress to test positive for coronavirus, a grim new indicator of the virus's aggressive spread. On Saturday evening, Congressman Diaz-Balart developed symptoms including a fever and a headache. Just a short while ago, he was notified that he had tested positive for COVID-19, his office says in a news release Wednesday night. Of course, Florida is the location of Petri Dish Alago, and the mayor of Miami got it while he was there, so I guess everybody else is going to get it too, and something, let's all go to the beach. The Florida Republican said in a statement he's, quote, feeling much better, but urged the public to take the virus extremely seriously. He then says some stuff about how we all have to work together and how serious it is, and I don't know if you wanted to hear that. McAdams, a Utah Democrat, said he too had been diagnosed. Today I learned that I tested positive, he said in a statement released on Twitter. That was on Wednesday evening. I am still working for Utahns and pursuing efforts to get Utahns the resources they need as I continue doing my job from home until I know it is safe to end my self-quarantine. The unsettling development underscores the unique challenge facing lawmakers as they both grapple with how to contain the spread of coronavirus throughout the U.S. and take steps to avoid spreading it within Congress. A Republican aide told CNN that the Capitol physician is now in contact with members who might have been exposed by Diaz-Balart and McAdams. That is to say, just about everybody. He works with members that are getting tested, and he consults with the members to map who they came into contact with, the aide said, referring to the Capitol physician. Now, remember the office of the attending physician? Yes, that's who we're talking about here. He then reaches out to them and advises self-quarantine. So all your committee members, all your staffers, the staffers that your staffers talk to, the members you ate lunch with, hung out with, sat next to at a caucus meeting, sat next to on the floor, voted next to when crowding at the voting machines, whatever. In a letter obtained by CNN, the Office of the Attending Physician told lawmakers that the office is carefully monitoring the Diaz-Balart and McAdams cases. Both are in good condition. The office has adopted a very conservative guideline. Aha, political, you see. To identify individuals who may have come into contact with the ill members during the pre-symptomatic period of March 13th, the letter stated. The office has additionally reviewed possible exposures among staff members and has assessed other areas involving the calendars of the affected individuals. They do keep pretty good calendars. That's good news. They know who they were meeting with. The Office of the Attending Physician has identified the offices and locations that were found to be at risk, and these have been treated by the architect of the Capitol using CDC-approved cleaning methods to ensure there is no residual risk to others. So wipe down all those surfaces in their offices and nearby. The announcements come the same day that President Donald Trump signed a coronavirus relief package that includes provisions for free testing and paid emergency leave as the death toll from the virus continues to climb and state and local governments hand down more aggressive social distancing requirements. More info? Sure, why not? As of Wednesday, more than 8,500 Americans have been infected with the coronavirus that we know of, and that number changes significantly by the hour. With the U.S. death toll topping 140, states are ordering more shutdowns. Hospital employees are making their own face masks or sometimes using them twice. Yay. And doctors are begging the public to keep their distance from others. But news of cases within the halls of Congress could upend legislative business on the Hill, setting off a new wave of self-quarantine measures from lawmakers that may have interacted with Diaz-Balart or McAdams, who both decided to self-quarantine after participating in House votes on Friday. Okay, I guess they were beginning to feel the symptoms then as they voted and went home. That process started in the wake of the announcements Wednesday night when Representative Drew Ferguson, a Georgia Republican, tweeted that he is self-quarantining at the direction of the House physician after contact with a member of Congress on March 13th that has since tested positive for COVID-19. He didn't identify which lawmaker it was, but I bet you can guess. Probably not hanging out with the Democrat from Utah. House Minority Whip Steve Scalise, the Republican of Louisiana, also said he was going into self-quarantine after an extended meeting with Diaz-Balart. He said he was not experiencing any symptoms. I've just been informed that my colleague, Mario Diaz-Balart, which makes me want to say Mario Diaz-Bacart, because Mario Kart, but I don't do that to him, tested positive for COVID-19. I don't know. He had a long meeting with the guy, and now he's in self-quarantine. I don't like talking about Steve Scalise or listening to what he has to say. Other lawmakers quickly followed suit. Representatives Stephanie Murphy, a Florida Democrat, and Wagner, Missouri Republican Kathleen Rice, New York Democrat, also announced they were going into self-quarantine after being in meetings with a colleague who had tested positive. Neither lawmaker identified which congressman they had been in contact with, but we're blowing the whistle on them here because CNN is. And I guess they're out with it now, so it's not really blowing the whistle on them. All right. Anything else that we should cull from this article? I think that kind of does it. For now, we've got those names and a watch list for people who are in close contact with them. And that's the value of testing. If it wasn't clear to you why aggressive testing by, say, South Korea would keep the virus in check, it was because I think, if I understand things correctly, it leads to a much more targeted isolation and quarantining regime. Why is it better to have tested so widely and so rapidly and aggressively? I think the number was something in the order of 290,000 tests administered. Because if you don't do it, your only alternative is the one that we have here, which is, all right, everything has to shut down and everybody has to go to their house and stay there as much as possible until we figure out what's going on, and industry has to shut down. However, if you can say with some certainty, all right, this person has got it and they know that they came into contact with this group of people, we warn them, that group of people go into self-quarantine, then maybe the industrial sector in which those people work doesn't necessarily have to close down. They got a hole at their production facility because 25 people went into self-quarantine, but that can be filled, as opposed to saying, we don't know what's going on and we have no capacity to figure out who's got it and who doesn't at this point. So that whole factory shuts down. And as a matter of fact, your whole supply chain shuts down because you just went and met with your suppliers in the week prior, and they could be infected too. And that's the big difference between what's going on in South Korea and here in the United States. All right. And speaking, as we were earlier, of the problems that President Idiot Trump is causing by continuing to insist that everybody else is at fault, and that it's China in particular at fault for spreading the virus, in addition to discrimination and harassment and assaults on Asian Americans of all kinds whom Americans mistake for Chinese, we have this news, which came to me via Scout Finch, Jen Hayden, over at Daily Kos. The Chinese scientist who invented the coronavirus test, or at least the good one that's working elsewhere, had worked at the University of Florida, which could really use this, for 25 years and raised his kids here, but left, along with two other notable researchers, because the Trump administration was investigating them. For what? I don't know, but Trump's continuing suspicion of China and all people and things Chinese, except for he had to kind of have his arm twisted about various national security risk posing Chinese goods, and he loved giving President Xi the most beautiful chocolate cake you ever saw. But his suspicion and persecution of people and things Chinese has cost us here. This used to be one of the strong suits of America, that we attracted the best and brightest from around the world, and now we're driving them right back home with our xenophobia, which, by the way, solves a big problem for the Chinese government, upset about losing some of their best and brightest to America. Now they're coming home because the American president hates them. The Trump administration drove him back to China. They didn't actually. He probably flew. Driving to China doesn't work. Where he invented a fast coronavirus test. So here's the guy who did it. Where did he do it? He did it in China. Where he could have done it would have been Florida, which would have been fantastic. But instead, it's in China. ProPublica reporting this. Our reporters here. David Armstrong. Annie Waldman. She's the best. No relation. But unless this article is awesome, in which case, absolutely genetically tied to Annie Waldman, and Daniel Golden, who I would happily claim a genetic connection to as well, I think. All right, a federal crackdown on professors' undisclosed outside activities. What? Is achieving what China has long struggled to do, spur Chinese scientists to return home. In this crisis, it's costing the U.S. intellectual firepower. Let's check this one out. On the 4th floor of the University of Florida Cancer Research Building, the once bustling laboratory overseen by Professor, oh boy, I knew this was going to come, Weihong Tan, that's not too bad, Weihong, Weihong Tan, is in disarray, like Democrats. The white lab coats are strewn over workbenches. Storage drums and boxes, including some marked with biohazard warnings, are scattered across the floor. That's bad. A pink note stuck to a machine that makes copies of DNA samples indicates the device is broken. Out of order. No one is here on this weekday afternoon in February, when they were there. On a shelf wedged next to instruction manuals and binders of lab records is a reminder of bygone glory. A group photo of Tan, T-A-N, surrounded by more than 24 smiling students and employees. As the Florida lab sat vacant, a different scene unfolded half a world away in China, where a team of 300 scientists and researchers worked furiously to develop a fast, easy test for COVID-19. The leader of that timely project? Tan, the former Florida researcher. The 59-year-old Tan is a stark example of the intellectual firepower fleeing the U.S. as a result of the Trump administration crackdown on university researchers with ties to China. Didn't have to do with coronavirus, of course, but didn't matter. And I guess this helps explain to a certain extent his willingness to pin this on China. He's already got problems. Our stupid fat president does. Tan abruptly left Florida in 2019 during an investigation into his alleged failure to fully disclose Chinese academic appointments and funding. He moved to Hunan University in south-central China, where he now conducts his vital research. I mean, they may have had real reason to be concerned about his contacts. That could still be true and would change the underlying tenor of the story, perhaps. But very interesting, and I'm glad we get a chance to look a little bit into what's going on. It's a very long article, and I don't know how much of it we're going to read, but I think we need some more information here. Tan, a chemistry professor whose research is focused on diagnosing and treating cancer, quickly pivoted to working on a coronavirus test when the outbreak began in China. It's the pivot we've all been waiting for. Boosted by a Chinese government grant, he teamed up with researchers at 2 other universities in China and a biotechnology company to create a test that produces results in 40 minutes and can be performed in a doctor's office or in non-medical settings like airport screening areas, according to a 13-page booklet detailing the test's development and benefits. It has been tried successfully on more than 200 samples from hospitals and checkpoints, according to the booklet, which Tan shared with a former Florida colleague. It's not clear how widely the test is being used in China. Epidemiologists say that the testing is vital to mitigate the spread of the virus, but the U.S. has lagged well behind China, South Korea, and even Italy, which is now, by the way, providing us with tests quietly, being flown in by the U.S. Air Force, I understand, via Twitter. It's hard to know if Tan's test would have made a difference, so there's that. The slow U.S. ramp-up has been blamed largely on bureaucratic barriers and a shortage of chemical agents needed for testing. Maybe he took them all with him when he went back to China. A star researcher funded by the National Institutes of Health, Tan taught for a quarter century at Florida and raised 2 sons in Gainesville. He was also a participant in the 1,000 Talents program, China's aggressive effort to lure top scientists from U.S. universities, and had been working part-time at Hunan University for even longer than he had taught at Florida. Last year, alerted by NIH, Florida began investigating his outside activities. Tan declined to answer questions about his departure from Florida or his new test, but he provided documentation that his department chairman at Florida was supportive of his research in China as recently as 2015. He is one of 3 University of Florida researchers, along with others from the University of Texas MD Anderson Cancer Center and the University of Louisville, who relocated to China while under investigation for allegedly hiding Chinese funding or affiliations with universities there. Such non-disclosure may well be pervasive. A ProPublica analysis found that more than 20 previously unreported examples of Thousand Talents professors who appear not to have fully revealed their moonlighting in China to their U.S. universities or NIH. I mean, that could be a serious thing. NIH has contacted 84 institutions regarding 180 scientists whom it suspects of hiding outside activities or funding, and it has referred 27 of them for federal investigation, said Michael Lauer, the agency's deputy director for extramural research. There's no reason why the U.S. government should be funding scientists who are engaged in unethical behavior. It doesn't matter how brilliant they are, said Lauer, who decided to discuss specific professors under scrutiny. Declined. I'm turning that into decided a lot today. But declined is the more likely anyway. If they don't have integrity, we can't trust them for anything. How can we be sure that their data they're producing is accurate? Okay, valid question. May have a valid answer, though. You could double check it. Yet, the government's investigations and prosecutions of scientists for non-disclosure, a violation previously handled within universities and often regarded as minor, may prove counterproductive. Okay, counterpoint there. The exodus of Tan and his colleagues highlights a disturbing irony about the U.S. crackdown. It is unwittingly helping China achieve a long frustrated goal of luring back top scientific talent. Thousand Talents aim to reverse China's brain drain to the West by offering elite Chinese scientists premier salaries and lab facilities to return home permanently. Finding relatively few takers, it let participants like Tan keep their U.S. jobs and work in China on the side, which may have been a good compromise position for them to take, or they may have had the vision and foresight to know that if the researchers they were paying kept those contributions quiet, they would eventually be caught and investigated, and that would pressure them to return to China. But I don't know if they really thought it all the way through to that point. But I don't know. I guess it seems like a legitimate subject for investigation now that I read about it, so I'm glad we went this far. By investigating Tan and other Chinese researchers for non-disclosure, the U.S. government is accomplishing what Thousand Talents has struggled to do. None of the professors identified in this article have been charged with stealing or inappropriately sharing intellectual property. Yet, in the name of safeguarding American science, federal agencies are driving out innovators who will then make their discoveries and insights in China instead of the U.S. The potential drawbacks harken back to an episode in the McCarthy era when a brilliant rocket scientist at the California Institute of Technology was deported by the U.S. for supposed communist sympathies and later became the father of China's missile program. John Brown, the FBI's Assistant Director of Counterintelligence, told the U.S. Senate in November that participants in Thousand Talents and other Chinese talent programs are often incentivized to transfer to China the research they conduct in the United States, as well as other proprietary information to which they can gain access and remain a significant threat to the United States. It's a claim I can understand. A spokesperson for the Chinese embassy in Washington, D.C. disputed such characterizations. No surprise there. The purpose of China's Thousand Talents plan is to promote talent flow between China and other countries and to galvanize international cooperation in scientific and technological innovation, Fang Hong said. While firmly opposing any breach of scientific integrity or ethics, we also condemn the attempt to describe the behaviors of individual researchers as systematic intellectual property theft by the Chinese government. It is extremely irresponsible and ill-intentioned to link individual behaviors to China's talent plan. Stephen Pei, PEI, a University of Houston physics professor and former chair of the advocacy group United Chinese Americans, said that both countries have gone too far. Both sides, I guess. Terrific. The Chinese government overreached, and the American government overreacted, Pei said. China tried to recruit, but it was unsuccessful. Now we help them do what they cannot do on their own. Pei added that U.S. universities are failing to protect their Chinese faculty. When pressure comes down, they throw the researchers under the bus. All right, well, I think we get the sense of what's going on here. It is an extraordinarily long story, not for ProPublica, to be sure, but yeah. Well, I'll allow you to read through the rest of it on your own. There are some more examples of other researchers and what they have had to face in all of this. And, well, it's rather fascinating, and I'm beginning to see how complicated a situation it really is. Okay, let's see. Important update we'll try and squeeze in before our third and final break. Twister Cat using our KITM hashtag, now much more at our disposal than ever. For the background story, I know you're all very interested in finding out the story of Dr. Amy Acton, whose name is actually Dr. Acton. And yes, I should have screen capped it. I wonder whether they've corrected the articles in The Hill that called her Dr. Action. I really do love that. I'm heartbroken to find out that her name isn't Dr. Action. But it's a great nickname, Dr. Amy Acton. And she ought to run on it. And it's a kind of a fascinating one. And it comes from the Vindicator, the archives of the, is that the Youngstown paper there? So this is sort of hometown doc makes good kind of a story. State health director's passion came from Youngstown. This is an August 2019 story. Kind of interesting. I can't remember whether Youngstown also the where Dr. Gay Hitler DDS came from. It was Ohio. I think we got that part right. Anyway, here's the story. She comes from Youngstown. Dr. Amy Acton had no expectation last winter to be picked by Governor Mike DeWine as the director of the Ohio Department of Health. She had never met DeWine. How interesting is that? She says she's as non-political as they come, and she smiles when politely dodging who she voted for, which says she either didn't vote or voted for the other guy. I hope it was for the other guy, really, honestly. If you get that much education and don't vote, it just seems like a waste. So, when he called her about the vacancy, she let it all out about what was wrong with Ohio public health care and what needed to be done differently. After all, she wasn't going to get the job. Well, she got the job. What she must have said was surely powerful. Or rather, what she said must surely have been powerful is what they should have said. But okay. But how she said it was probably more powerful. She unloaded on me about vital Ohio health needs for 30 minutes nonstop. Then I asked her my second question. And this is our writer here. Did I identify the writer? Is it? I don't think I did. And it doesn't say up at the top. Let me scroll down. Here we are. It's Todd Franco, Franko. I guess it just displays funny on the screen, but he should know that it's depriving him of his byline. So, sounds like she has lots to say. Well, it comes from a passionate soul. It comes from a feisty spirit, but mainly it comes from Youngstown. There are big Youngstown cheerleaders there. Here's where we should back up a bit. How an ascension story like Amy's, we'll call her Dr. Amy, Dr. Action, typically goes is, she is the daughter of a well-to-do medical family who followed in her dad's footsteps. Through political connections and donations, she arrived in Columbus and got an appointment after appointment until someone who was connected pushed her in front of DeWine, right? Well, not this story. Amy's story is Youngstown. They're really proud of it. Abused, abandoned, neglected, working a gig life before there was a name for it, figuring it out on her own and making up rules as she needed to. She did this not just for her, but also for her younger brother, and it started at age 3. My parents met at a theater party for YSU and got pregnant unexpectedly, is how Amy starts. Literally how Amy starts. It does not get better for a long, long time. It was the 1960s. Her mom was an artist. Dad talked mom into marriage. A younger brother came in. And then divorce when Amy was 3. Oh, that's a tough situation. It got out of control. Custody back then always went to the mom. My dad tried to get custody of us, she said. Out of control meant 18 or so homes for her first 12 years, scattered around the north side. Mom, brother, Amy, and many, many pets. One place literally was a basement, bare walls, sump pump, boxes, and a bed. More troublesome than a nomadic lifestyle were the men in Mom's life. Amy calls them a cast of characters. It's very fascinating, an interesting way for them to start, and an interesting place for her to end up. We'll spend some more time on it next. Hi everybody, it's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Roots Radio. Well, I do feel like we need to continue on with the story. I'm actually sort of interested in this person and how they'll be able to impact healthcare in response to the virus in Ohio. So just to give you a little bit more sense of what's going on, I will continue with the article. I do note, though, let's see, now being sent around video, is this, when was this tweeted? I should check this out. Now, this is from yesterday afternoon, so you may have heard about this already. But I did notice that he had some echo in some lawmakers on Capitol Hill, Republicans, of course. But Trump apparently expressing the fact that he is, as he says, open to punishing the Chinese somehow for COVID-19 and really literally taking it out on them because trade wars are good and easy to win. And, all part of the program to deflect blame, etc. But clearly, I don't know, he wants some kind of confrontation with China about this. And I did see John Cornyn's name being tweeted around yesterday as backing that whole idea up, and that there was something culturally wrong with the Chinese, and so they ought to be blamed. And it had to do with, again, let's say unrestricted dietary choices that they sometimes make. But if I saw it correctly, he was, the Chinese culturally are eating snakes and bats and dogs, and therefore something, blah, blah, blah. And I did see Amanda Marcotte pointing out, as a Texan, I feel, duty bound to point out that we eat snake too. It's a very Texan thing to do, and John Cornyn knows that very well. I'll have to dig up that tweet for you so I can share it with you. But yeah, I just wanted to put that out there because that's, a real dangerous place for this to go. The idea, and it'll spread among Republican supporters of Trump's. Of course, they'll be more than enthused to cheer for the idea that there should be some punishment exacted against the Chinese. And I don't know, they sort of have a big military and stuff, and maybe it's not such a great idea to go down that road. Maybe we could cure the disease first. Anyway, what about Dr. Action and where she came from? This is kind of a fascinating story. We were finding out about her childhood. Tell us about your childhood, Dr. Action. Well, there was, of course, The cast of characters that were involved with her mom. At one point in childhood, they moved to California. Mom got into a fight with whoever was the man at that time, so they traveled back home. They got as far as Nebraska. Mom got a job to earn money, met a guy, put her kids, ages 8 and 5, on a bus alone back to live with their relatives. Some trip. 3 months later, Mom, too, was home, and the cycle continued. Well, it's a tough life. I have so many crazy stories. I spent so much time being scared as a kid, but also navigating the adult world, Amy said. One guy finally hung around for marriage. That's when Amy's life got worse. She was between the ages of 9 and 12. The guy had accusations of molestation events in his past, she said. With his abuse of Amy, there was finally enough evidence that officials were called in and criminal charges were filed. How do you like that? It's amazing. It was winter and the family was living in a tent in a campground outside Youngstown. I was lucky that it got bad enough because it got me out of there. This is a hard story. She was finally able to move in with her dad and his relatives. Her Liberty life kicked in. I don't know exactly what we're talking about here, and it would be a better life, I guess, living in the town of Liberty, Ohio. I see. Money was always tight, but they were safe and there was food. She eventually would become Liberty Homecoming Queen, class of 1984. How do you like that? But no one ever knew her story. You know it now, though. It's hard to tell people about this because it makes kids uncomfortable, she said about her younger years, so you just keep it all in. She's more at ease talking about it as an adult, but the tears still come as if it were yesterday. Her dad, Jerry, died a few years ago. Her brother lives in Colorado. She hasn't seen or heard from her mom since a day in court after that long ago arrest. In the courthouse, after they were charged, I went to give her a kiss and she just turned her cheek away. That was the last time I ever saw her. Wow. Out on bond, Mom and her husband skipped town and have not been heard from since. Amy's medical interest grew from a hospital visit as a child. She wanted to be nice and nurturing like the staff. In that dank north side basement, she heard on the radio about a medical school attached to Youngstown State University. It became her obsession. My dad always told me I could be in life whatever I wanted to be. And now with the state of Ohio's health as her job description, she is set to go. With Youngstown first, she said. DeWine visited the Vindicator newsrooms one last time Thursday. On his way out, I asked him about his hire, Dr. Acton. He looked up through his blue-framed glasses and offered this with a wry smile. She's special, isn't she? Amy's tale is likely my last one as a daily newsroom editor, as it turns out, which I've been since 1989, our writer says. I wanted to end with a story like Amy's. I got into journalism by fluke, but learned the game quickly. Journalism has plenty of fascinating and compelling components to serve every living soul in a community if they give it a chance. More people gave journalism a chance when our grandparents and great-grandparents ruled these streets. So a little lecture about journalism on the way out, but we'll take it at this point. Journalism in further trouble under this new recession. Believe me, people being laid off left and right. Journalism is a facet of our First Amendment right to free speech, he says. It's what makes our country the greatest, even in our worst moments. The component of journalism I love most is the privilege to drop in on lives that have elevated themselves. I always believed if I did my job right, their story could possibly elevate others. That is how we're here, after all. One generation elevating itself above the times and toils of the previous one. A new job awaits me. I'll have the privilege to help communities across America preserve this pivotal tool of journalism, perhaps to not lose what we are losing with this last Vindicator you are now reading. Oh, I didn't realize that there was more than him leaving. It was the Vindicator shutting its doors. Is that what he's telling us? To end this job with a tale like Amy's is why I love my job. I could be in life whatever I want to be, she was told. It's been true for Amy. It's true for others. It's true for cities. I'm glad God gave me the chance to have told Amy's story, and I'm glad she allowed me to have found Youngstown, although really could be she, God, this is. allowed me to find Youngstown, Ohio. Okay, so, well, if you feel compelled to contact Todd Franco about it, you can find him at his email address, toddfranco@gmail.com, or finding him on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter. Twitter, he's T. Franco. We all love Twitter, so maybe you can find him there and thank him for his story of Dr. Action, as we call her. That was kind of interesting. Totally off of our usual path there, but I thought a welcome break. All right, where to go next? Man, I couldn't even tell you. Couple of things worth thinking about. Here, let me grab Hunter's write-up of a rather fascinating aspect of this whole coronavirus outbreak thing. The wealthy are trying to purchase their own ventilators, just in case. How about that? If you're still looking for illustrations of how mega wealth have perhaps steered us wrong, a shortage of ventilators, now well known as a potential problem across the country, has been a problem in other countries, I think destined to become a problem in this country. And so the mega wealthy have stepped in after a fashion, right? I mean, they could come in and say, I will buy ventilators from around the world, although I don't know how many ventilators are available. Everyone's going to need them, so they're probably grabbing up everything they got. Or I will open a factory and begin manufacturing ventilators. Elon Musk says apparently that he'd be willing to do that if there starts to be a shortage, which, as a visionary, he should be starting that up now before there's a shortage. But okay, whatever. Maybe he's not that much of a genius. I don't know. But no, the wealthy in America are not either doing it on their own or banding together with the rest of the wealthy folks and saying, let's just, it would be a great place to spend our money. Let's open a ventilator factory. Instead, they're saying, maybe I can use my mega millions to buy up ventilators that would otherwise go to waste saving poor people in a hospital. And I'll just have it in a closet here. And if I have breathing problems, I'll know that I'll be well taken care of. I won't rely on hospitals. I have my own ventilator in the basement. Apparently, this is really true. All but buried in a New York Times article about the impossibility of rapidly ramping up ventilator manufacturing during the COVID-19 pandemic is this line. Are you ready? Noting that hospitals aren't the only ones, of course, scrambling for these life-saving machines. Ventec CEO Chris Kipple, K-I-P-L-E, Kipley, I don't know, we'll say Kipple, even received inquiries from a number of wealthy individuals hoping to buy their own personal ventilators, a fallback plan in case the American hospital system buckles. Don't prop up the American hospital system for the greater good, just buy your own ventilator. Ventilators. Rich people are now attempting to cut in line for ventilators, Hunter tells us. And why the hell wouldn't they? They have their own legal system. They have their own transportation networks. And as has become painfully clear in these recent days, important groups like politicians, celebrities, and sports teams seem to be having little problem obtaining coronavirus testing kits that have been so sharply rationed for the rest of the nation that even exposed healthcare workers showing COVID-19 symptoms have been denied. This raises many questions. As medical equipment, can ventilators even be sold to non-licensed personnel? How dire do these individual wealthy snots think the situation is about to get if they no longer trust that the wealthy will get them, that being wealthy will get them top-tier hospital care that being wealthy always has? Always provided in a healthcare system that is premised on the notion that healthcare should be dispensed only in proportion to each patient's ability to pay. And is it just me, or have the wealthy been trying for 20 years now to goad the world into a new French Revolution, one six-figure wristwatch and private ventilator at a time? Is it not clear how the dynamics of any of this would really work out in practice? Because Americans of various ideologies all have disparate notions. I guess it's not a question. It is not clear. I don't know why I reversed those things. But how would this work out in practice? Because Americans of various ideologies all have disparate notions of how they and their kin will vanquish their enemies, a.k.a. their communities and neighbors, to get the care they need even if others can't. The wealthy apparently believe they can reserve their own ventilators. Gun nuts with a closet full of weapons and ammunition preen that if push comes to shove, they will be able to secure whatever their communities have that they might need. Petty opportunists believe that their several dozen rolls of toilet paper will function as a bargaining chip and currency. All of them are likely to be surprised when they find out this is not the case. The current local shortages of essentials are likely to ease once panic buying has subsided. The wealthy might learn that BYOV plans are, when introduced to a hospital overflowing with families of the dying, more complex than they planned. The gun nuts will never get the collapse of society required to realize their warlord of Pine Avenue fantasies, and if they did, it would be because there is no United States left and all else is moot. Maybe we need to have a list. Maybe this is an actual good reason for one of those nationwide databases we're always threatening to make, or making accidentally anyway. All the people who are acting like monsters, worsening local crises, ordering their personal staff to pull a ventilator from the supply lines just in case they personally might at some point need one. These are all people who should not be let back into society so easily when the shelter-in-place warnings subside, the vaccines appear, and the idiot man-child who ignored us into this crisis retires to his seaside carrion pile. It's been a while since this nation or others had the sort of good public shamings that could drive the worst of society off for a while. It probably won't work, but what the hell? Nothing else has. I'm not saying we need to ship them to New Australia, but well, wait, actually, that is exactly what I'm saying. Does any nation have a spare continent or peninsula that they could part with? The taxpayers would pay top dollar if you don't ask any further questions. And the answer, of course, just to pull it back from a little while ago, is Greenland. That's probably why we should have bought the damn place. Linda Chapman chiming in to say it's Keipel, long I on Keipel. My son is an engineer at the company. Okay, well, that's very interesting. So get us all ventilators, Linda. What are you waiting for? What do we need, like 6 or 10 to cover everybody who's listening here to the show today? All right, allegedly many, many more. Okay, Keipel. Thank you. See, you never know who's going to have the answer out there. That's fantastic. One of the things I love best about, everything. The internets, I guess. All right. Next. Where to on this one? How about this odd speculation from Ian Millhiser, who tweeted this short thread out. Where is Ian these days? Vox is where he is now. This caught my eye. I think it'll be popular with listeners, with people crazy enough to listen to this show. Okay, let's see. What is he's reacting to an Los Angeles Times politics tweet that asks, could Trump delay the November election? I mean, a relevant question now that we are thinking about delaying, or in some cases actually delaying. That's how we got to Dr. Action, right? The delay of the Ohio primary. What about Trump delaying the November election? Could he do it? LA Times politics section tweets, not without inviting President Pelosi. Well, I don't know whether we spend time reading their article as a setup to this or not, but Ian Millhiser says, nah, not so fast. I don't know that it would really work that way, and he's got good reason for saying so. But first, I guess, let's just wade through this and see if there are any clues to help us figure things out. Evan Halper, for the Los Angeles Times, voters are unnerved. Confusion is growing throughout the country as the coronavirus outbreak moves states to postpone primaries and change voting procedures in the midst of a presidential election year. It is all leading to a lot of speculation, sometimes uninformed, about what could happen in November if this virus is still spreading. Are there any guarantees the election will actually happen if congregating in public places, like polling stations, is still a risk come fall? Can voters be confident President Trump can't exploit this crisis to avoid facing them if he fears defeat? I think that's what is on everybody's mind. The short answer is yes. While government officials have the authority to reschedule voting for the party's primaries, that flexibility does not exist for the general election. But it is all but certain to happen as planned. The question is whether states reeling from the pandemic will be prepared to accommodate everyone who wants to cast ballots. Here are some fuller answers to key questions about it all. Can Trump use the national emergency to delay the election? No. That's what it says here anyway. The president does not have that power, but who cares? Legal scholars are widely in agreement on this point, as are both Republican and Democratic election officials. The nonpartisan Congressional Research Service reached the same conclusion when it investigated the question in the aftermath of 9/11. Under the U.S. Constitution, if you haven't used it for toilet paper by then, Trump and Vice President Mike Pence cannot stay in office past their 4-year terms without being reelected. If the election does not happen for any reason, constitutional rules of succession kick in. And it does seem to be the case that the Constitution sets a specific end point for the terms they're now serving. But as you know, anything can happen. That could mean a lawmaker down the line of succession who is not up for re-election could be the new president. That person very well could be a Democrat, and installing a Democrat in the White House is not an outcome Trump or any partisan Republican seeks. The 20th Amendment says that if we have not chosen a president by a certain date, it goes to succession, said Rick Hasen, an election law scholar at UC Irvine. We've called his name before. It's not like a delay would keep Trump in office longer. So, the presidential election happens November 3rd, no matter what? Well, very likely, but not absolutely. In an extreme emergency, Congress could put it off for a few weeks. A 1948 law is very specific about the election date. The Tuesday next after the first Monday in November in every 4th year succeeding every election of a president and vice president. Complicated way of saying the whole thing. Lawmakers could change that, just not by very much. If they push the date out too far, they quickly run afoul of the Constitution. Why can these states then delay primary voting? Georgia, Kentucky, Louisiana, and Maryland have delayed voting in party primaries more than a month amid coronavirus concerns. Maryland? I didn't even know. Ohio, which was to vote on Tuesday, did the same on the eve of the election. Despite a judge's order that polls should open, state public health officials declared gathering and polling places unsafe, and the governor sided with them. Dr. Action, right? The moves are unsettling to voters, but not unprecedented. New York passed emergency legislation to postpone a local primary election being held on September 11, 2001, and disrupted by the terrorist attacks. Florida delayed some local elections interrupted by Hurricane Irma in 2017. State officials have flexibility to delay election day voting in primary elections. They do not have that authority in rescheduling federal general elections. It's important to remember the distinction between primary and general elections. Edward B. Foley, director of the election law program at Ohio State University, wrote on Twitter, "There is no equivalent power in the states to change the date of the general election for Congress or the presidency." So, what happens if it's not safe to go to the polls on November 3rd? This is a big issue, which elections officials and activists are wrestling with now. States, not the federal government, generally set their own election laws, and that has left some states in a much better position than others. States, including California, are well positioned because they permit no-excuse absentee voting. All voters are welcome to cast their ballots by mail or at drop-off locations. In at least 13 states, voters must provide an excuse, such as a medical condition. Those states are being encouraged to quickly lift their restrictions on absentee voting. We have that here in Virginia. A bill in the U.S. Senate would require them to do so while the public health crisis persists, but it's unclear if it'll pass. State lawmakers are also mulling action. The clock is ticking fast. Lawmakers are abandoning state capitals to take refuge from the outbreak, and elections officials are warning them not to wait until the fall to act. Oh well. There are all manner of logistical issues involved in expanding vote-by-mail operations, and elections officials would need time to get ready. There is very little time to move things in state legislatures, said Jeanette Senecal, a senior official at the League of Women Voters in the United States, we want to make sure all voters have access to the ballot box and everyone's civil rights are protected. Okay, terrific. We've learned a lot. Where does it lead for our consideration? And the answer is back to Ian Millhiser. So Ian Millhiser grabs this tweet and says, well, this is incorrect. This is the part that makes for interesting procedural thinking. If Trump hypothetically managed to delay the election past January 20th, Millhiser says, the result would not be President Pelosi. It would, in all likelihood, anyway, be President Patrick Leahy, which is okay compared to President Trump. But I mean, Pat Leahy, frustrating. You know why if you've been listening to the show for a long time. But allow me, that is Ian, to explain why. If there is no election before January 20th, Trump's term expires on that day, as does Pence's, so neither one of them is president. If you follow the law and Constitution and stuff. Third in line, though, as many of us know, is Speaker of the House. But if there's no election, because every House member's term expires on January 3rd, Pelosi isn't Speaker of the House at that point and doesn't become president. That's a good point. January 3rd, those terms end. If there's no election before January 20th, then we have nobody who's been elected. We have dissolved the House of Representatives. They've adjourned sine die. And we have no House. That's interesting. But of course, we also have no Speaker of the House. Although I do wonder about whether or not for certain purposes that might not be extendable. We'd have to see what courts would do with it. But they have this remedy. Fourth in line is the president pro tempore of the Senate, who is the senior most member of the majority party. Now, currently, that's Chuck Grassley. So watch out for President Grassley. But wait, here's where it gets really tricky. 23 Republicans are up for election in 2020, and only 12 Democrats are. So if there's no election, all of those 35 terms expire. But if we then subtract the 23 Republican senators and 12 Democratic senators, I'm turning into Sherrod Brown here. Speaking of Ohio, my voice is doing a Sherrod Brown on me. All right, 23 Republicans lose their seats because of the lack of an election. 12 Dems. That means a Democratic majority all of a sudden in the Senate, which survives as a continuing body, as they like to say. So Patrick Leahy becomes the senior most member of the majority party and therefore president pro tem and fourth in line to the presidency. So he presumably becomes president on January 20th when Trump's term expires. One caveat, just one, is that state governors could potentially try to appoint replacements to the vacant Senate seats. For the moment, at least, Democrats control enough governors' mansions to prevent these appointments from flipping the Senate back to Republicans. Admittedly, he says, I'm less certain about that last conclusion. I haven't checked how many state governors' terms expire before January 20th, because again, we're assuming no election. Or who could fill those seats, if anyone, if no election takes place. And it's not entirely the case, not necessarily the case that state elections for governor don't take place, even if the federal elections don't. But in any event, the president of the United States would not be Trump, Pence, or Pelosi if no election takes place before January 20th. It would be either Grassley or Leahy, and I'm fairly sure that it would be Leahy. And I haven't really worked this out in my own head, but it gives you something to think about for Friday and into the weekend, in case we can't come back with an all-new show to distract you with something else. But seems like a fun way to wrap things up. I gave it some brief thought as I was tucking this away in pocket. I don't see any serious holes in what Ian has to say, although what it made me think of was the situation I once pondered about the beginning of the Trump administration, and the fact that Joe Biden, as vice president, presided over the opening of the new session of the Senate some days earlier before his term expired, and was responsible for collecting all of the elections credentials from the newly elected senators, and that if he, for whatever reason, opted not to recognize all of those credentials, then for a brief moment, the new Senate would be composed of only 66 or so of the senators who hadn't stood for election, and a Democratic majority existed there, and they might well, at that point, choose to approve the nomination to the Supreme Court of Merrick Garland. Remember that situation? Well, as it happens, the main critic from the right-leaning side of things was one of the imps at the Federalist, who has since largely discredited himself in every possible way, including on the coronavirus right here, right now. And so, I don't know, that gives new life to the theory and new interest in it anyway around here. And when we're sitting around with nothing else to do, I suppose we could ponder that. I know who does have things to do. Justice Putnam. He's got a show to bring you, the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and that's up next right here on Netroots Radio. I have no doubt that he's got an interesting collection of stories to share with you as well.
From Daily Kos Radio on netrootsradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
Here, this one seems odd. Mike Pompeo apparently has threatened the International Criminal Court, the court staff, and their families with retaliatory actions for investigating war crimes against the United States, which sort of feels a little bit like a war crime by the United States, but I guess there's no war going on. Maybe it'll be with China.